UX in development, user experience in development. It's not a term that we hear very often. It's not a term that's a development term, it's usually a design term. And this is a term that I really like. I personally really like UX because I do a bit of design and I do a bit of development. And usually in design, we take UX into large consideration. We take UX into consideration when we're doing things like the user interface. The UI is important because we need to structure that around our customers and clients. And user experience is important as well when we're trying to figure out the flow of how a website should look and feel. But developers don't really work with UX as often. Normally we're there after the designers have worked on something to start building it out. And this means that we don't think about UX. We hope that the designers have done that for us. And I think that's a little bit of a mistake. It's a mistake for a few reasons. The first thing is that us as developers, we don't get to interact with that client or target audience or customer as much. Normally we leave that up to the salespeople. We leave that up to the designers. They're the ones in there going and talking to all those groups. They're finding out the details of what they need design-wise to be able to create an application or website. But us developers, sometimes we're not in that table. We're not in that meeting. And I think it would be great if we were. Being able to understand who the target audience is a really important thing when you're building out features and functionality for a website. And normally when we do it, we just try to focus more on the function itself. We just want the function to work. We want the feature to work. We don't really think about how the feature will work for our customer. We just need it to work, whether it's a sign-in, whether it's a conversion, whether it's even an email reset for a password. We don't think about who our target audience is. We just think that we need to develop this feature because we've been maybe handed over a design doc. But a good thing to be able to do as developers, I think, is to be able to talk to our customers. Every type of target audience uses applications differently. I've built applications for business owners and CEOs. And when they're using things, it's really important for them to be able to be in and out of applications within minutes. They might only have so much time in the day, and therefore when they're using an app for, say, news, they'll need to be able to only spend a few minutes on it to get all their headlines immediately. They don't have the time to spend on there for ages like, for example, I might when I'm jumping on Reddit or Twitter. And because of that, you have to develop an application to be very fast and effective at doing that. It's all fine for a designer to create the layout for that. But as a developer, if you don't understand that, you won't be able to develop good apps. With developers, we usually develop things for ourselves. And what this means is that when we're developing, our development essentially takes a different turn because we intuitively understand how it works. When you understand your application inside and out, you might think that it's easy to use. You might think that it's not complicated at all. And from an outside point of view, when a target customer or client or target audience views that, they might not understand because they're coming in with a different mindset. But because us as developers don't often interact with them, we don't know about this. So we keep building out functions and features that essentially are quite difficult to use. Our users do eventually adapt and start using them the way we might have designed them to do, but that's not UX. That's not UX in development. UX in development is actually about us developing the functions to work the way they should for the customer, so they don't have to think and figure these things out. This is fine in UI design because we always take the time to consider these things, but in development, we don't consider them as much. And there's another mistake to this as well, because in design, when we're doing UX, it's very easy to open up, say, a Figma board or a sketch board and play around with different designs. It's almost as if wireframing and UX go hand in hand because they're so easy. When you're designing stuff out and creating layouts and getting further and further in, it's still really easy to move around elements to essentially test out UX. But development is different. Doing development in UX, I would say, is more necessary because the time it takes to do something in development is a lot more complicated. Say you want to create a workflow for a certain function or feature. You have to take into consideration the whole application, the architecture, the database, the API. And when you're building it out, you're going to have to spend hours, days, even weeks maybe, building out a certain feature. If you're not taking UX into consideration, you might have to later refactor this. And this might come back with maybe some testing and something, and we find out the customer is not using the function the way we want. But what does this mean? It means that because we didn't look at that UX at the start, we as developers have to spend way more time to fix it up later. In design, it only takes a few minutes. You just move around a few items, but developers have to spend hours to fix this stuff, to rebuild the architecture, because there's so many components that essentially make things work. And this is why it's really important to be able to measure twice and cut once, especially in development when it comes to UX. UX in development means we could save a lot of time if we build things out better from the start because we planned them out and talked to the customers. This is why UX is so important to me in development. Personally, because I came from a field where I did both design and development, I always took these things into consideration. So I feel that I've always saved myself a lot of time in the long run by putting UX first in development. But I think this is something that more people, especially developers, need to be able to do. And it means that when you're able to do this, you'll be able to save lots of time yourself. You won't have to do as much, say, A/B testing. Because A/B testing also is a method of essentially doing UX, where you're testing out what customers are doing. But UX isn't easy either. You have to spend a lot of time developing two different approaches to the same solution. And essentially, even when you test that, you have to keep refining it over and over. It's much easier if you're able to sit down with a target audience and figure these things out from the start. And this is something that I've been doing a lot more of these days. When I'm building out any new startup or application or website, I really like to be part of the conversation from the very start. I might be doing more development these days, and when I was doing more design, I usually was part of those initial conversations. Designers aren't always part of that table conversation at the very start, where you're talking about the website and what it might do. But by being part of that conversation early on, I was better able to understand who the customer is, who the client is. And by doing so, I was better able to develop things when ideas came up, when different features were put on the table to create maybe a workflow for e-commerce or something in general, such as a user doing a certain interaction. By being on that table, you're better able to talk to your client to find out exactly what they need that to do. Because in their mind, they might have a completely different process in mind than what you might. Because you might be doing the same thing over and over every day. So you'll just be implementing that same solution without taking the business into consideration. And the other aspect to that is that clients sometimes don't even know who their target audience is or how they use it in general as well. So it's really important not to just talk to the client or customer, but the actual target audience of that client's website or application. And this sometimes can be done in a number of ways, like surveys, for example, or getting them in and just talking to them. And us as developers, by us being part of that conversation, we'll be able to build better applications. We'll be able to build out better features that'll take us less time and testing, less refactoring. And I think that's the main result of our conversation today. I think UX in development just means that we're doing things better for our customers. And that's what I want to do. So that's my understanding of UX in development. I'm sure there's other considerations to take in, and I'm sure that there's a lot more to UX than just this, but these are my thoughts on it so far. What do you guys think about UX in development? Have you had issues where you weren't part of that conversation initially when we're developing websites? Because I know that I haven't, and it's always been frustrating later on when I find out that users want things differently. And I have to go back and change all of that. It's a lot of code and a lot of changes to do. Anyway, my name is Adrian. I do videos around design and development. And if you haven't already, hit like and subscribe because it helps me out and lets me know what kind of content you guys like. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. P.S. Before you guys go, I was thinking about doing some more content around design for developers. If this is something that you guys would be interested in, learning a little bit more about how to do UIs and stuff like that, let me know in the comments below. I might do some videos around that. Thanks.